What we're going to show you here is an extension of the last video, which was introduction to vehicle searching. Now we're going to actually show you how we would train the dog's vehicles. This is the first 10 to 30 vehicles the dog ever does. And you remember that you're going to take a quarter of the vehicle, which can look like, in this case, we took this whole wall of the first vehicle, or it can be from this here to here. So you've got a corner, which is probably the most important part to work, is a corner. And we're going to just dissect it and work sequentially. So what you're going to see each dog do is a series of hides, between 5 to 10 hides, starting here, which is the threshold. Basically, what I'm counting as the threshold, I want to make the threshold a small part of the search area. Let me just define threshold real quick. The threshold is the first part of a search area your dog searches. And in our classes, we use it to actually mean how long it takes your dog to start searching. So some dogs, run out with super fast speed and they don't start searching until they've already ran half the vehicle. So what that means for me is that this is your threshold. And I'd like your threshold to be just this red circle, right? Basically a straight line from me to the car the dog is immediately searching. So that'll be hide 1, then hide 2, then hide 3, then hide 4, and then if we're doing 5 hides, always begin and end with a threshold hide. I think in this case we go a little bit further. We go from end to end and then back to the threshold. But again, we're just stringing the dog along the vehicle so that they learn to search the vehicle sequentially. Let's start playing this and I'll keep commenting while we're doing this in the background. So the only thing that is important to teach the dog the first 10 vehicles is that there's going to be odor on the car. Okay, and you can see my wife paired it and she even tapped on the hide and the dog still runs past the threshold. Thresholds are the most important hides you can set. It sets you up for success rather than frustration. The only thing I need to teach is if there's a vehicle in front of you, probably a good idea to search it. Pretty simple. We also, this is Ghost, our dog, we also decided to do her off leash so that you could see that this is not about handler influence. This is the dog learning how to work a systematic way on their own. You can see we repeated the threshold hide there because she skipped it. If the dog is running past hides, we'll just keep doing that hide or a similar hide until the dog doesn't rush past it. And then we can move to hide number 2, which, as you can probably see, is right there. Very nice. And it's a threshold hide as well. The threshold, is a thing in your head, so it can be as big or as small as you want. But you can see we're working our off leash. What's a leash for in nose work? Well, a leash is for safety only. So in this case, we're in a fenced-in area. It's safe. Well, we don't need a leash. Why would we use a leash when we can allow the dog to learn simply by hide placement? Now, I can still do that on leash and allow the dog a lot of freedom. And that's what you're probably going to end up doing in most of your classes because not every search area is safe. But don't use that leash for restraint. And, again, this is a training session at home. So if it took us an hour to find a hide, it takes us an hour to find a hide. But in class, sometimes we limit the search area with the leash to save time. So are you starting to see that she's starting to search in a more methodical way around the car? One of the things that I want you to note is that the dog has, as you can see, has a lot of hunt drive. We're going back to the threshold because I didn't feel that she searched the threshold enough. The dog, we don't introduce vehicles until the dog's already hunting at the intensity that we like to see. So if you haven't spent enough time building drive, I would go back to a drive building stage before worrying about pattern searches. That doesn't mean you don't do vehicles, but I like one of the nice things about vehicles is usually you have all those problems squared away before you do it. So vehicles becomes the most exciting search because the dog has always learned to do it the right way. You can see she's moving slowly. She doesn't need my help. Why does she need me to tell her it's on a car? And there she leaves the car, catches the odor, comes back. She can do all that learning on her own without me. She does not need me there. The handler, at the first few times you're doing the car, should do the best to stay out of the dog's way like I'm doing. They can move a little bit, especially if their leash is kind of short, but they should not be trying to guide the dog through the search area for sure. And they shouldn't be telling the dog whether they're doing it right or wrong. The dog is just learning. This is learning phase of vehicles. They are not being told they're right or wrong. It's the hide that tells them whether they're doing it right or wrong. So you can see she's getting a nice detailed search. She's double checking and being more thorough on her own. When she runs too fast, she double checks the threshold all on her own. Okay, those are some of the skills I want to instill in my dog on vehicles. Makes my job a lot easier. If the dog doesn't go to the car, the most important thing is to be patient. You can see I'm pairing these hides with my dog, and that's always a good practice. If your dog's not going to the car, pair it, set yourself up so the wind's blowing your direction, give your dog lots of time, but definitely don't help them find it. You'll find yourself regretting that later on. It's a very nice pattern. She moves a little quickly, but I'm okay with moving quickly at this stage of learning. If there was a hide there, you better believe she would have found it. And now we're going to end back at the threshold where we began. The thing that you should remember is that you shouldn't expect your dog to do it right at the beginning. It's totally okay for them to struggle and wander and not understand what they're doing. That's okay. Just let them figure it out on their own. See, she ran right past that threshold. That's why we like to end on a threshold hide. And totally allowing her to work it out on her own. The handler's job is to reward the dog at the right moment. The trainer's job is to set the hides in a way that is conducive to pattern searching. As you're seeing, Natalie's the trainer in this video and I'm the handler. I think we switch in the next video. She's going to run one of her dogs and I'm going to be the trainer. When you're rewarding the dog on vehicle searches, we do our standard 3 reward system, which we have a file in Patreon for if you're interested in that. So that means when the dog hits the odor, they're going to get multiple rewards. She just ran right off. Multiple rewards, and then they're going to be lured off the odor. And then when you're done rewarding, the lure shouldn't work. They should go back to the car. And then we pick up the hide. That's how you end the searches in the beginning. In this case, we're still transitioning. So you can see we're still luring the dog away from the hide. That's the way we used to do it. Now we're recommending that you pick it up every time. The most important thing, or one thing to consider, is that you shouldn't really do high hides on vehicles. The reason for that is because you can get faults for scratching vehicles. And if you teach your dog to jump up on vehicles, and therefore they're scratching them, that's not a great lesson to instill in the dog. You can work on high hides in every other element, and then if in the rare occasion you'll find a high hide on a vehicle, then you can worry about that when it happens, and you can trust that your dog will do it. You can see, look at this dog running way off the vehicle. We don't do anything. We don't interfere. Let the dog work it out on their own. It's also, I'll just mention in passing that the sheep are right behind the car. The sheep pen is right back there. You can kind of see some sheep moving around. And this is our herding dog. So she's working independently for odor off leash around sheep. That's what we're talking about drive building. The dog absolutely knows their job and has no question. Now, if you can see, I just broke the rule I just told you. Don't set high hides. Why did I set this? Well, she's running past the threshold. She's an elite level dog. So I thought with this level of dog running past the threshold, I don't mind reinforcing that idea once or twice. It's not going to kill her. We decided to show you all 4 of our dogs because we wanted to point out that different dogs work differently. And you should allow for that variation and not worry too much that every dog should fit into this kind of cookie cutter. No, we allow each dog to work at whatever way they want to work. I mentioned that the first concept we're wanting to teach the dog is that there's going to be odor on the car. And that's the only thing that we're really interested in. But if we can also at the same time teach the dog to work in a patterned way, which you see we're building, that's also great. You can see we just did like 4 threshold heights. We did medium, high, and then low. All of those, we really insist that our dogs are great at threshold heights. You see that there's a cone here. That cone is there to indicate where the handler should start the dog each round. Sometimes we move the cone to different places. Sometimes we start real close to the car. Sometimes we start out to the side. But we want to start each round from the same place to instill the pattern. It's worth talking a little bit about why we pattern train the dogs. And the reason is because searches are timed. It's not because we want control of the dog or anything like that. It's because we want the fastest time. So a dog that free searches is not necessarily going to be the fastest dog, whereas the dog who just glues to the car and moves around it is going to be the fastest dog in general, especially at the higher levels. So that's why we pattern train. Now here I put the hide on the wheel well, on the top of the tire tread. Tire tread hides are like something I'm really loving doing right now because it just stumps so many dogs because we don't set hides there. And one of the things I want you to get out of this is notice that we've never really gone out of our way to hide the hide from the dog. The hide has been in plain sight, right? And I think people make too big of a fuss about the dog visually identifying the hide. Don't worry about it. Just let the dog work. If the dog has a nose, then they're going to use their nose to find it because it's easier than using their eyes. And in this case, you can see it's in plain sight right above the wheel well, right there. But you can see she has no idea, even though it's very, very visible if she was looking for it. And you see, we're not getting in her way. She worked that vehicle left and right and out and in, and we just let her work out the problem all on her own. Over time, she's going to develop a nice, simple pattern of go straight to the car, then work in a detailed way around the car in one smooth loop. That's our goal. Now we come back to the threshold, and that's the last hide. And we're going to see if the dog is good on thresholds or if the dog's going to rush. Now what happens here is kind of interesting. She's been sniffing the cone the last couple times, and we didn't want that to become a behavior chain. So we reset her and decided to put Natalie in a position that the dog wouldn't search the cone. If you watch that back, you'll see she hit that cone each time. And so we didn't want to accidentally train that. The hides that stump dogs on vehicles are sometimes going to be surprising to us. So just set hides everywhere and start to learn. We focus at first usually on wheel wells because that's what you see a lot in trial. But the door seam, the license plate above the tire tread is going to be also important. So this is our dog Icy. The last dog was Hazel, if I didn't say that. This is Icy. We're working her on leash and with a toy, just to give you some variety of watching dogs work. And you can see even with the leash on the dog, we're not controlling the dog. The leash is there only in the case of a safety hazard. And we're setting the hides the same way. You can see how fast she is. The rewarding with toy is kind of fun because we can deliver it in different ways. We can let her come back to it and take it from us. We can throw it to her. We can throw it in a lot of different ways and make it appear at different timings. And it allows the dog to be extremely driven, but also extremely focused. And you can see she's very fast and very enthusiastic. So that's what we wanted to show you. She's a very enthusiastic dog. You see her go back to that hide? Remember, again, leash is for safety, not for guidance of the dog, not for communication. In other dog sports, use the leash for communication, not in nose work. In nose work, it's only for safety. One thing I want you to note is that really the toy and the treat, the reward is very similar. It's just delivered slightly differently, but the timing's the same. Now it's on the front tire again. She's very fast, but we're not slowing her down. She's slowing down because of the hides we're setting. And she's also doing a hide, I think, on the tire tread. There it is. Very nice. Natalie showed a different delivery of the toy. Think also about fringing. Fringing is any alert from the dog that's not at the source of odor. And one of the questions I get a lot in my classes is, would that have been good enough for the judge at a trial? And I think that's not a good question. The question you should ask is my dog trained so that they could pass a trial with the most strict judge? So for that reason, even if it would be acceptable in trial, like the hide on the top of the tire tread, if my dog alerts, say, here, most judges are going to call it. But that doesn't matter. In training, we make the dog alert here. So now what we're going to do is, because she's so fast and driven, we've put the hide back at the threshold, and I've instructed Natalie to get to the cone and just rush her past. And so we're trying to get the dog to screw up the threshold, and that allows the dog to be responsible over the threshold. And that's a great way to slow fast dogs down. You see how she rushes past, and then Icy takes her back. That's what we want. We want dogs that cover for our mistakes, not just dogs that we have to cover for their mistakes. And that's a way that I usually end with my classes, is by teaching the handler to proof that threshold by rushing past. The last dog we're going to show you is Lumi. And I want you to notice how similar these sessions have been. This one's going to be a little bit different because she's our most experienced dog. She has some bad habits trained in that we had to undo. One of those habits is what we were talking about just a second ago. She fringes on the wheel well because she's done a lot of trials where she hasn't had to put her nose at the source, and I haven't fixed that in training, obviously. So you're going to refine this wheel well to death. The hide is going to get stuck on this wheel well for a long time. And it's worth every second of training to do that. You're going to see I'm also walking with her more rather than sitting back and letting the dog do it on her own. But I'm not interfering. My walking is just supportive. The difference you will need to have a good idea of the difference between a false alert and a fringe alert. In a second, she's going to fringe alert. A false alert is anytime the dog alerts when they're not in odor. A fringe is when they're alerting in odor but not at the source. In a trial, if your dog fringes, it's the same as a false. But in training, we should treat it differently. Fringing, we need to teach the dog to source. Falsing, we have to prove against a whole other set of behaviors. So nothing my dog did here really worried me because the dog was doing the best with the information she had. She just needed more training. It helps also if you've done some of this patterning stuff before you do the vehicle. And we usually start with can. So we put a low wheel well hide right there. So watch what she does. Oh, she gives me a little alert and then leaves, right? She's telling me, well, there was odor there, but you didn't call it. And she left because she knew she wasn't exactly on it. There, she found it. Very nice. I'm not going to reward anything less than nose at source, because I want to pass the trial with the strictest judge and not just get lucky to have an easy judge. So now we're sticking to that wheel well because she skipped it, and now he's going to put it up high. So watch what happens here. Notice how I allow the dog to do whatever she wants and not get in her way. So the dog falses there, and I basically don't do anything. I'm leading the dog away, if anything. The dog says, well, I'm right. Why are you walking away? Well, that's because it's your job to find the odor, not mine. See her, she's kind of confused why I didn't alert. Now she's alerting exactly where it was, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm just walking past. It's like if you want the reward, you find out exactly where it is. And now she's detailing. There you go. Now she alerted at the source, and she gets a reward. Guess what we're doing now? We're doing a wheel well again. And it's important to let the dog set the hides in pattern training. Look at what the dog is telling you and let the dog tell you where the next hide should be set. So let's see where Natalie sets it. Okay, so now we're going to the right, just out near that tire tread. Nice. Hit it right square on. That's beautiful. So from here, we don't need to do this wheel well again. We can move forward if we want. We could also stick to the wheel well and keep proofing. There would be nothing wrong with that. And you should all get excited about finding search areas within search areas. Just this wheel well can be one search area if you want it to be. Now we'll move the hide down there. And watch what happens to this tire. Is the dog going to false again on the tire because we just did like 4 hides on the wheel well? Let's see. A hesitation, she's working, but nope, moves right past it, right? So that's the difference for me between a false and a fringe. If she had false there, that would be a false alert, not a fringe alert. Her making snap judgments on wheel wells is a very bad problem because what if the hide was on the other side of the vehicle and blowing under and out this wheel well? Then the dog would alert on this wheel well potentially instead of taking me around. So I need the dog to be sure that it's there. Now we're doing another wheel well hide right up here. So we can watch the dog. See how she stops there? She's telling me, and this time she didn't alert until she sourced it. She just needs a lot of this to compensate for the amount of trialing and workshops we've done and not recovered. Every time you do a trial, you need to recover the dog with sourcing hides like this because you're not rewarding the dog at source at a trial. You don't know where the source is. Only the judge does. Actually, only the CO does. The person who sets the hide is the CO. So now we're going all the way to the end of the vehicle. Notice that, again, we're only doing a quarter of the vehicle. The wind happens to be moving this way. So one of the things we could do that would be counterproductive would be to set a hide on the other side of the vehicle. Okay, and what it would mean is the hide would blow through the vehicle and my dog would be tempted to let me switch colors here. My dog would be tempted to do the pattern and then either go under the car or switch directions and go around this way, which that could break my pattern. And right now I'm focused on building the pattern. Let's not undo that in the training we're training to build the pattern. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't let your dog problem solve on vehicles. You definitely should. But just make sure that you when you're building a pattern, you build the pattern. When you're problem solving, you're problem solving. Keep those things separate at first. That was a nice threshold where I tried to rush her past, and she didn't have anything to do with that. Couple things I want to note. Remember, this is your first 10 vehicle searches. Pick a quarter of the car and do it just like this. Set 5 to 10 hides. Let the dog build drive, build focus. Remember that patterns are things you train, not do. So you don't do a pattern in a trial. You train it, and then if you've trained it well, it will happen at a trial. You just allow your dog to do the pattern. Every dog is different. Don't expect them to work the same way as any other dog. And have fun. Let the dog work. Enjoy watching them. Don't get in their way. This is how I introduce dogs to vehicles. I don't put too much stress on this, and we just do this until it's perfect, and then we start adding multiple vehicles together. If you have any questions, make sure to post them, and I'll be happy to release videos explaining any nuance that you might have questions about. Thank you.
We can change.